a lot of prep, not knowing a lot of stuff you weren't going to be going into the rain and all that you try to prep for. Can you just talk a little bit about the prep and the amount of gear you took, just in general? I mean, there's a lot you could go into, but just a quick recap of all that you had to do to go into it prep-wise and just to tackle something like this in general.
So I double prepared everything as far as food, clothing, towels, gear was all over prepped. So I made sure I had twice as much as I would need for everything. And that's a good thing I did that, because originally I planned this trip on my own. Missy was going to be roadside assistance for most of the trip, but as far as it was just going to be myself. And then Missy came along in the plans a little bit later. So it was nice to be over prepared. One important aspect was bringing along a GPS tracker. And so this tracker had an emergency button on it, and it's just one button. If anything was to happen, it was already pre-programmed all emergency services around. And if I would have got stuck, or especially with the river, it's very powerful. And if you've never done a trip like this, or if you've never had an accident on the riverways, you will discover that it's a very powerful force, and do not take it for granted. So the emergency SOS beacon, which I really give a lot of thanks to my best friend Lance. So I started this trip. There was no plans to have this event or any kind of film when we first started this trip. It actually kind of developed halfway through our trip, and me and John talked about, possibly doing an event here. So now I have to kind of retwist, because the film was recorded in a VR 360. So all that footage had to be converted into a standard footage so you can see as it is here today. But anyway, going down through the river, there was a lot more visual history than I had imagined. We went through, the first thing we came across in Curtisville were these log booms, and that was really cool to see. And they're still there, and they're deteriorated. And with all the other history, that the railroad bridges we went by, and Missy's a real good railroad expert. She was telling me all kinds of history about how the railroad evolved, and then the canal systems, and what probably the most important ancient aspect of the river is the hellbender. And that goes 100 million plus years ago. And I never really knew how old the river was until doing this trip. And it's amazing when I heard that the river is actually older than the mountains that are around it, which is kind of interesting. And Matt has some stuff here prepared for us for that in a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, Matt, if you can give some context as far as the age of the river history aspect, it would be helpful.
Yeah, sure. So when I saw the title, Old River, being a stream ecologist and spending so much of my time in this watershed, I thought, oh, wonderful. Someone is finally going to make a film about the geology of the river. And I love that your perspective on it is so different from mine, because I don't think that way, and it's healthy to see that. So the age of the river, the Susquehanna is one of the oldest rivers in the world. Depending on who you ask and what cores you use, it's somewhere between 320 and 340 million years old. So to put that in perspective, this river was around when the dinosaurs went extinct. It was 100 million years old when the dinosaurs first evolved. The hellbender is a baby in this river. Most watersheds, if you think about the Grand Canyon, if you think about the Colorado River, that created a path through the west, through mountains that already existed.
So you want to talk a little bit about AMD, what is it, where did it come from, and just kind of what you've been dealing with out in the Shannon Creek area.
Okay, so you saw in the film the iron deposited on the rocks at the mouth of Boulder Run. And you also saw how cloudy the water flowing out of Clearfield Creek was. And then, after you were downstream of Boulder Run, you got into an area where the whole river was cloudy. Now that was the right place for that to be water coming out of Shannon Creek. And Clearfield Creek and Shannon Creek are the two biggest sources of acid mine drainage, and its acidity and metals. Alder Run has terrible water chemistry, but it's a much smaller stream.
The work that you do to connect people to the river, recreationally?
Yes, I think it's really extremely important to connect people to the river and our public lands recreationally. But I'd like to comment on what Eric just said about the West Branch in the past being impacted by acid mine drainage, the entire West Branch of the Susquehanna, and kind of speak about how if the work and the efforts of people to clean that up, we would not be able to recreate the way we do today on the Susquehanna. We wouldn't be fishing and kayaking and paddling and doing all the things that we're able to do now. And I'd also like to talk a little bit about the interconnectedness, like John was speaking about, but with partnerships and all the people that came before, like decades before me and others that worked really hard in Pennsylvania and in our region to plan trails and natural areas and conserve these areas so that we do have them to recreate. That's definitely something that when I was building Roebler, never really thought of or considered, that all the people that came before, decades before, and all of the hard work that they had done to make it possible to recreate the way.
Go ahead.
My perspective, too many hours on the computer for him. I heard everything at least 100 times.
So again, the major aspect was that it was recorded with a 360 camera, so that takes a video in every direction. So the data on that is about 10 times greater than a normal camera that just takes a normal 1080 view or 4K or whatever. This one records in, I think it's 8K, and then it's got a full 360